Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. We are going to have our monthly customer webinar for Evolve Electrical. Today, we'll be covering some of the new features and updates from the 6.4 release. We sent out an email about this to our customers on Tuesday. And if you still haven't downloaded it, make sure to go to evolvemep.com/downloads, and you can find the files there. If at any time you have a question, please use the Q&A function and we will answer all the questions at the end. If we end up running out of time, we'll make sure to follow up with you after the webinar. And this webinar is being recorded. We are going to forward the recording to all registrants. So if there's ever a future customer webinar and you're worried about missing it, don't worry, we always send out the recording. And here's a quick introduction to your customer success and product team. We have Alex Siebert, Amber Zinke, Andrew Somerville, Adam Heon, and Jason Earl. And they are your Evolve specialists, helping you out on the support side and on the webinar today. So with that, I'm going to hand things off to Adam Heon. Adam, please, whenever you're ready, let's dive into 6.4.
Great, thank you very much. I will share my screen and we'll get started. All right, let me just pull up the chat window on my other screen here. So as we go through this, as Marina said, if you have questions, please post them in the chat. If it's about something I'm going over at the moment, I'll try to keep an eye on it and answer it. Otherwise, I'll probably just save a bunch of them for the end. So I'm going to go through the 6.4 release notes for the new things and some of these improvements. I'll give some examples of what these are. And then there's a couple other things that I wanted to cover. One being a common support issue that comes up. And then I wanted to get into some of the Ben settings and just kind of clarify a few things there as well. Then we'll see what questions come up. So first item on the list, I'm actually going to save for the end, just because it's going to take a little time to go through it. So the second item here is generating the Evolve configuration ID for the duct spacers. So if you're not aware what that's referring to when it's saying Evolve configuration ID, within hanger families and Ben families, there's a parameter, evolve underscore configuration ID. Just pull up my parameters here. Right here. In this parameter, this is a hidden parameter that we generate a hash, which evaluates the parameters of the family to give it a unique ID based on its configuration. So this is how we separate similar bends or quantify similar bends and hangers. You'll see this in our schedules. If I go to schedule here, this is probably hidden. So let me just unhide that. So right here. So obviously nobody can read this, so we just hide it from the schedule, but that's kind of what we're doing in the background. So we've added that same functionality to the duct spacers. So now what you'll see when you're in the Evolve ribbon is an update button. So this is going to refresh the code. So let me demo this out and just show you what happens here. So I'm going to start a new project just to make it relatively straightforward. And I'm going to parallel this. Let's do 4x4. And we'll go 7 inches. Okay. When we go to place duct spacers on this, I'll load the family in. Give it some value here. Select my family. Some values there, and I'll leave everything else as is. So I'm just going to go ahead and place those on here. And I will open up a schedule. And we're going to display the Evolve configuration ID. So you'll see all of these are the same because the pattern amongst them are the same as well. So let's say, for example, these conduits drop off, whether it's a change or not. Actually, let me just draw this out so we can see it coming out of here. Okay, so say if I just pulled back one conduit, I've now changed the pattern that goes through these two spacers. So this is what the refresh button will do. So you have to consider when we place it, we generate the configuration ID based on what that is. But if at any point in time, those conduits change or shift, that pattern changes and you'll need to update. So it's going to be good practice to update these if you're utilizing that config ID. So what I'll do is I will update my view. Let me just pull this onto the screen, or doesn't matter, current view. And now if I go back to my BOM, I'll see this is grouped out here, or it's blanked out. And I'm going to sort this by configuration ID. And now I have two. So I have two of them in one pattern, 7 in another pattern, which is this. So obviously if I pull it back again, refresh, then my BOM, now say 6 and 3. So that's kind of just a first, another enhancement to the duct spacer feature. Another common request along the same concept is generating some DXF files or something like that based on the hole patterns. So we'll definitely continue working towards that direction in the future. The next one is a pretty simple one, but helps those who are not utilizing all the features, even all at once, and they want to clean up the tools. If you notice now, our settings button is over in resources. So we moved it from utilities to resources. The reason we did this is because of this feature. When you go into your workstation settings, you'll see there's a panel here now to hide the various panels in the ribbon. And so you do have the ability to shut off utilities, for example, which would shut off the settings, and obviously don't want that. So here you can basically just check on which panels you want to hide. And when you hit OK, they get hidden from your display. This is going to be by workstation. So this is by user. So use that if needed. Delete spool. That's just going to be a really straightforward function. Previously, the reason there was no delete spool function is because there was the Revit disassemble. It's not an assembly. Let's see, I think this was an assembly. So before we had disassemble, basically would do the same thing. Now you have a delete spool, which again does same function. Clash detection. So this can now rerun clash detection on hangers in your view. And you can display, highlight clashes and clear them out. I don't, let's see, I might have a linked model in here. Let me just pull this in if I can run it real quick just to show it. Yeah, some clashes there. Okay. So let's run the tool. Oops. I wasn't. I may have to look at this. I wasn't prepared to send this one. Let me just check this real quick. I think that's what I need to set my rule. Set the tolerance. I'm gonna move on from this one. I forget what I have wrong. It might be my link. Let's come back to that one. Next one is the quick access to selection config. So selection config is a setting that we have that's not commonly known. And what it's used for is to basically change what your default selection filter is. So the common use case would be say for spooling. If you never wanted to spool hangers, for example. Well, currently when you use out of the box spooling, when you select something, oh, I have a better one. Here's my location box in the background. So it's like I'm doing a selection and it's just grabbing that box, which is really hard. If I do a selection like this, I can unclick it and unhide it. But let's just say I never want to spool that type of thing. What I can do is I can go into my selection config, and what this will display is a list of each feature that has a selection config, basically any of our placement type functions where you're doing a selection of elements, quick tools and what have you. So here's my define spool. So I can go into here and it'll pull up the current element filter. You'll see that generic models is listed. So all I have to do is uncheck that and hit OK. And now if I were to do define spool, you'll see the generic model location does not get highlighted. So what this feature does is when you are in your dialog for one of these features, there's a little arrow now next to the settings button. You'll see this one is black, which indicates that this has been customized, it's been modified. So if I click on this, it gives me access to that config. I can hit restore default, hit OK. That goes white, just indicating that it's a default config. And that's what the feature is. So it's a small little UI enhancement, again, really to kind of bring light to this feature because I think it can be useful. So that's what that is. Next is continuous single hanger placement. So let's see. Yeah, I can do it. I can do it here. So when I'm in a placement mode for a single hanger and I do my selection, once it places the first hanger, it's going to stay in an active placement mode so that I can continue to place. And I have clash detection on this rule. But it stays in the placement mode, so I can just click until I hit escape out of the command. There's a question here on hanger rods. I'm going to come back to that question. I'll keep it there, and we'll come back to that one because I have to look into it. So yeah, sorry, that was the continuous placement enhancement. The next one is a renumber by continuous run. So this was a mechanical request of the tool. But basically, if you were, let's see, we'll do entire path, just break this up. And let me throw a tag on here. Let's just do custom ID. All right, so when you're in the renumber command here, there's an option for renumber by continuous run, which is going to allow you to select basically a start point and an end point, and it'll number in that direction through the run with continuous numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to disable all these and create one from scratch. And let's call this conduit. We'll create an element filter for just conduit. What am I in? That's okay. So I'm going to delete this. I was editing a rule. I didn't realize it. We're just going to give this an A, a 1, custom ID. That's fine. We're not going to use common numbering. Oh, and these just need a description. Starting value. I don't know why I saw an error state. Okay. So I have my conduit element filter, which I didn't turn on right there. I don't believe. Let me just double check. Conduit enabled. Let me shut this one off. All right, now I'm going to renumber continuous run, hit OK. So that's my start point. There's my end point. It's going to process through. And you'll see A1, A2, A3, A4. So again, it's basically user select start element, end element, and it connects, it goes through the connected path in numbers in sequential order. All right, this next one, the compare data utility. So this one's a really great utility for those who maybe are doing some troubleshooting or writing sync rules and things like this, or just want to evaluate elements. Inside the utilities panel is the new compare data button. This window can be pulled on another screen while Revit stays open. And what this allows you to do is make a selection. It'll pull in your selection into this grid over here, and it's going to display all the various parameters of those elements and their values. So you'll see here's my 2 different conduits. And then it's showing me my distinct values here. Now, a couple things on the selection, you'll see that as I deselect, select something else, this thing is staying live and open and active. So there is a limit to what it'll process to prevent you from locking this up. So if I made a really big selection like this thing's going to just max out and say no go. So just keep that in mind because you really probably aren't going to want to select much more than a handful of elements. But yeah, so basically it gives you a way to compare elements, essentially what's the name of it. You can do some things where you can show only differences, helps you narrow those down. So another use case, let's look at those templates that we placed. So if I did a select all and compare data. You see the only difference between those templates are the configuration ID. So you got all of those, and then a few of them that are different. So again, it's a kind of more of a model management, maybe type utility, but it's pretty cool to troubleshoot some things with. User-defined grid formatting. So the I think the use case came within the Find Elements tool. Let me go into my model here. And pull over my panel. So I'll refresh this and do a search here. Mouse feels like it's dying. All right, so now when you right click on a header, you have conditional formatting, which you can create various rules. And you can save these within a grid state. So let's just say I wanted to highlight all the eaches. So I can say conditional formatting, highlight cell equal to EA, and I will green fill the entire row and hit OK. So I get some cool colors there. What happens is if I switch this view, refresh it, I'm going to lose this formatting. So within my grid states here, I can do a save as and say highlight EA green. And now this is saved as I set it up. So if I were to change my filter, let's go to, let's use materials. Well, it doesn't matter because what I'll do is I'll go back to setting up the previous one. So as I refresh this, I will, my grid states will be changed. If I go back to my highlight each is green, it's because of my columns. I have to go back to my original data profile, sorry. Because it's based on my columns. And I think my column here was unit of measure. It's just different. But now if I go to highlight green, that formatting comes back into play. So that's kind of the way you would save the conditional formatting. Again, I think the basic concept of creating the rules should be straightforward, very similar to Excel. All right. Last one, just something might be useful within the quick tools. Now, when you highlight, hover over them, we'll get little quick tool videos. We'll show kind of the general use of the tool. So that's now displaying in all the quick tools, I think, except for the alignment tool. So those are there as well. So that kind of covers all like the new items. A couple of the improvements, I probably won't show some of these, but just to explain what they are. With reports, these are some kind of technical improvements we had to make in order to do some advanced reporting that we've been working on. We've also enabled the ability to use label templates in reports. So there was a built-in label function in the designer. Let's see if I can pull it up if I edit one of these. I'm probably not going to be able to find it. I'll look for it for a second, but if I don't find it, I'll move on. But inside the designer, there is an option to use labels, and I think they have a series of templates, built-in templates. Yes, it's going to take a bit to load. So that's available in there now as well. Application macro support, that was just within the macro automation tool. We were only handling project macros. So this is just at the application level. For PowerShell enhancements, when you're inside of PowerShell, there is a button now for global functions. So this is going to be, if you're really diving into the PowerShell world of Evolve, and you start wanting to reuse a lot of the same code in other areas, this will just allow you to build in basically a global function throughout the project. So a more technical feature there, but that's come up as a request actually. So the data profile enhancement. So the big one here came from mechanical allowing ancillaries to be captured. But one thing you'll notice in the profile now is there's a new column called special ITM, special/ITM values. The ITM values are obviously not applicable to electrical, but what you will notice is there are some parameters that we're extracting where previously you had to use PowerShell to get. So for example, element ID or your XYZ coordinates, those can now be pulled into parameters or returned as values without PowerShell. So it actually speeds up the performance if you were using this. We used a lot of the project information fields within the reporting. So there's actually a performance impact, slight performance increase there as well. So just know that that's available. The last one was the continuous quick bend. That's just a small enhancement here, but now when you're running the quick tool, when you hit OK, it stays active. So you can just go around and click things. So until you hit either cancel or when you're in the command, you hit escape, the command will stay running. So that's really those items that I wanted to review. Definitely go through the changes. A lot of minor things here. I guess some items worth noting. I mentioned the settings button moving. The locations calculation is now by volume of the element. Before it was just doing it by order. So it wasn't we felt that the volume calculation is more accurate. We are working on some other enhancements for locations as well. So we'll be looking for that. The smart bend, we do have a precision configuration. I'll get to some of this one at the end once I cover some of the bend settings. But other than that, I think hopefully these all make sense of what they are. I'm trying to just run through them real quick. And yeah, I think that's pretty good. And then these are various bugs and issues that have come up over the last few months that we put in and corrected. So yeah, definitely go through the release notes. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to us. The last thing actually what I want to cover is the drawing register integration. So I did not set this up in advance, so we'll just kind of do this on the fly. All right, so when let me pull up Foresight actually and make sure this is set up here. So everybody who has an electrical license has access to this design module. There's also now a drawing register, which allows you to upload drawings to from the project file. And then you can map those drawings to a work request. So I'm not going to go through the full demo here, but I'll try to touch on a kind of high level of what we're able to do now. So from the model, when you're inside the export utility, oh, that's okay. What I'm going to do is let's just say I want to send this sheet to Foresight. Within my destination tab, here, I'm just going to delete these because I don't need to do them. Now, when you click on output, you have an option for Foresight. And within the location field here, you have to select your project. The warning was that I switched my project, so I had to just come in here and select it. But here's where you kind of define your name and number parameter, which probably won't change. You also have the option to include a QR code. So I'll check that. You can change this position of where it lands on the sheet, which corner it is with some offset options here. And I'll hit OK. So I'm going to change this to PDF. And preview, there's my one sheet going to Foresight. So I'll go ahead and run that. And success. So now when I'm in Foresight, there's my drawing coming in. See, it's processing. This while I'm at it. So what I'm going to do is map a drawing to an activity, and we'll see when it comes up. Make sure it lets me do this so that I can kind of show where this kind of displays. Let's refresh this, see if it comes in. Still processing. It's not a big file. I'll give it another 5-10 seconds. Let me look at the questions that have come in. Here's a question about upgrading from 6.2 with an existing active project. Was the best way to update that will allow me to use any new schedules or preset evolve template information in views. So there's no issue with updating from 6.2 to 6.4. The update process is going to be just like it would normally be. Go to our downloads page for the installer and run it, or coordinate with your company admin to install it. And just make sure that everybody that's working on a project is all using the same Evolve version. You don't want to be running conflicting versions of Evolve in project files. So hopefully that answers that question. All right, I'm just going to move on. I don't know why this is still processing, but good old demo never fails. Okay, so essentially the import into the drawing register was one step. I was just going to show the display of the sheet so you could see the QR code, but that just displays in another function of Foresight. All right, the next thing that I wanted to do is go over a support issue here. Actually, before I do that, let me look at these questions and come back to these. Okay, so question here, sometimes with trapeze, when I'm using top of rod elevation, it won't adjust when you raise or lower the trapeze. For quick fix, I just use custom rod length, came back to change it back, and the rod will snap to the elevation. Is there a manual way I can refresh when the parameter messes up? So, Bo, you'd have to reach out to us about this, and maybe I'd like to see the condition because I'm not sure. I'm not aware exactly of the condition that's causing it to not be correct. So I'd have to see that, but I'll reach out to you to follow up on this. The second question. Okay, and on your second question, we'll follow up on that as well. All right, next question. Is it possible to filter or choose which parameters are compared with the compare data tool? So I think the question would be like which parameters here to display or to look for. Currently, there is not. I guess you could use a filter to hide certain things or show certain things. I mean, you do have grid functionality here. So you could do something like that, but you don't have like a grid state ability. So I don't know if that's exactly what you would want. Another one on the compare, will the results be able to be exported to Excel? Yes, you can export this to Excel or a table. So we have a few other enhancements we've been thinking of with this tool. I think there's a lot of other enhancements we can make to really get some value out of this. All right, the last question here before I move on, I copied some of the EVOs there's to a different level. So David's question, I guess I have not heard of that happening. So the question is copying different locations and then changing the name. So let's say if I have something like this, I'm assuming you're copying it. You may be doing something like this where this is filled out. And then you're bringing this over and changing the name. And then doing a sync. I think if it's, I'm assuming this is the issue. And then if you do assign, I can do select. There's A1. There's B1. Yeah, David, just reach out to me, or if you want, shoot me a model. And I have not heard of it happening, so I'll have to try to reproduce it. All right, so I'm gonna. All right. Where was I? Support ticket. So a common support ticket is with our sheet creation tools, whether it's spooling packages or locations. The issue, the cause of the issue is a title block that's incorrectly set up. So let me take a title block here. What will happen, I would say it seems to appear more with schedules, where someone may copy a schedule here and change the view template to, I don't know, cut list 2. So there's a couple things that occur here. One, the main point to point out is that the view template that's defined here needs to be in the project you're using. So while I can do a drop-down menu and it looks like there's options here, this is just reading the values that are existing in this family. So it's not really giving me options. It's just displaying text values. So a couple things happen here. One, a view template is changed where it doesn't exist in the project, or the type of schedule that is needed is incorrectly matched to the view template. So let me load this in and go through a couple of these scenarios and show you what occurs and what the results look like. Let me do this. I'll just spool this. This and I'm going to create a sheet. So here's a result where I put in a schedule and I'm getting an obviously unfiltered schedule here. So um, so that is going to be caused because the view template that I defined here, this cut list 2, does not exist in this project. So if we go to my view templates, there is no cut list 2. So if I duplicate this one, for example, and call it cut list 2 and hit OK, and then if I rerun that command, there's my BB1. I'll regenerate my sheet. I'll keep what's assigned. And now I get basically 2 of the same schedules. They're obviously filtered conduit out, but that's got my desired results. Now, another issue comes when a view template's created from a different type of schedule. So let's just say I'm creating a new schedule and it's a conduit fitting schedule, and we're going to call this conduit cuts. So this is for conduit fittings, and I will just do evolve description and length. So I'm not going to bother filtering this, but at the end of the day, this is a conduit fitting schedule. And I called this conduit cuts, I believe. Let me just make sure what I called it. Oh, I did not create a view template. I'm sorry. I named the schedule conduit cuts. So from here, I'm going to create my view template. So I'm going to say create view template, and I'm going to call this cut list 2. So I'm just going to replace what I had, and I'm going to replace it, cut list 2. Now, if we go back to my title block, remember, I do have now a view template called cut list 2, but it's a conduit fitting schedule, whereas this is being defined as a multi-category schedule. So now there's a conflict between the schedule, the type of view template being applied, and the schedule that's being trying to be created. So now when I do this, hopefully I can replicate the error. Okay, I think we might be handling this a little better, but I did not get an error that I was expecting, but I did get an incorrect schedule. So there is an error that occurs, which I probably should have brought up, but that can happen in here where it says object instance not set. But typically what that has been is something very similar to what I just pointed out, where a view template and a schedule did not align properly. So I think that covers the support issue. The next thing I wanted to get into were the bend settings. Let me go to, there we go. Yeah, we'll go here. And let me throw in an offset. Okay. When you go into your settings and you go to smart bends, the smart bend settings, I'm going to cover some of this stuff in a little detail here, just to explain what it does. And I mainly wanted to touch on the first thing, which is this is a project level setting. So if you've been using Evolve for a while, and you created a template with Evolve, which has a SmartBend config file attached to it, basically, these settings are not just getting retroactively changed. So what has occurred, and you can check this, where if you open this up and say all some values, maybe like all these values here are 6 inches or something, or you see lots of zeros. When you see bad values like that, it's usually an indication that it's just an old config file that's since been updated with additional settings because we've expanded on this over time. So if that does occur, or a good practice, if you do have a template file with just our default settings, down here on this export import button, you can say restore to default. Once you do this, it's going to reset your config file. It's going to shut down, and it's going to come back to our default settings here. So that's kind of a quick way of kind of refreshing this. Now, it's not like typically, I don't think we've made any changes to these numbers. That's not the type of changes I'm talking about. Typically what is occurring is we're adding new enhancements like these columns. And if the old config file didn't have the column, it's going to come in as a default value or a 0 or something. So I just wanted to clarify that. And so everybody's not thinking we're just modifying some of these numbers here, because we're not. Okay, so now I guess what I'll do is I'll come through a couple of, I'll go through these columns, I guess, in order, and I'll go into some a little more detail than others. So I think your radius Mark 1 deduct, this X value, these are coming right from your Bender manual. The X value refers to the table, specifically in the Greenlee benders, where it gives you the, it's not the deduct value, but I think it's a value for calculating offsets and kicks. Then we have the default stub length for 90s. This field is actually a setting we had to do because Revit would go a little wacky based on certain sizes of conduit and types of conduit. So this kind of provides like a default value to be driven to the family so that you just don't get an error that was randomly occurring. So it's really, there's really no need to necessarily change this. But what we found is if somebody would say, hey, 2-inch EMT is stub 90 is not drawing right, this could be a potential area to modify and it could adjust it. So that's a column really not intended to be touched. In fact, I would probably just hide that and not look at it. All right, next chunk here deals with kind of your angle, dealing with angles and what happens. So the first column here for the kick 90, what this is referring to, or what this whole grouping is referring to, is your bend spacing, is your distance between two bends. So it only applies to a type of bend that has more than one. So stub 90 doesn't apply to, obviously, or an angle bend, but just kicks, offsets, saddles. So this is that distance between the bends. Now for offsets and saddles, the issue came up where the distance between bend was not really the preferred method of calculating an angle for an offset and saddle, because you can make these a lot tighter. So this panel here is really intended to override those calcs, but you do have to enable it because this came in as an update mid-release. And so we didn't want to just drive in this change, but this is something you would have to enable. So quickest way to do that is you could just check the box here, bulk update, select enable. Yes, apply, and now that's enabled. So I'm going to show what this does in the difference between the two in a second. So hopefully it makes more sense. But essentially, these values are coming straight from the Bender chart as well, which define what's your minimum height by angle. So these are coming straight from the catalog. So you basically have a choice, these values or these. Essentially what this does is allows you to bend tighter bends, more accurate, tighter bends. All right, jumping over to the bend configuration tab, just to point out a couple of the new things here. Your bend precision here is going to impact your bend information. So it doesn't impact the geometry, but it impacts the results of the bend values. So if your offset is 10 and 11/32, that's going to come in just like that, or I could round it to an additional value. Again, it's not going to impact the geometry, so that bend will always be 11/32, whatever, but the reporting value would be different. And because the reporting value is different, the configuration ID will also be different. So as you increase this value, essentially, say if you had two offsets side by side, one was a 32nd higher than the other, if you raise this up to a 16th or an 8th, you would actually see those two bends get grouped together as being identical. So that would be the impact there. So really the intent for this would be to basically filter your bends down to something to a more realistic bend precision at times, and to try to group more common bends that really should be grouped together. Your minimum leftover length, so that's going to impact your consuming functions here. So when you're using a consume JSON tool, and it's coming close to the end of a conduit and a coupling, you would notice, well, previously there would be sometimes there'd always be a 12-inch piece remaining. That was a hard-coded value, which we put in here as a setting. So essentially, when you're using the consume function, if you never care about zeroing out a straight piece of conduit, you could just set this to 0, and it'll just max out the full conduit. So hopefully that makes sense. I probably could demonstrate that as well if I need to. Okay, so let's take a look at the impact of these. So let's see what I have here. All right, so I have an 2-inch EMT, and I'll go to my bend settings here. And currently I have 2-inch EMT to the 855. So let's get down to that. And let's just make it a little easier for me. All right. So I'm going to shut this this option off. So now what I'm using is our legacy bend spacing parameters. And what I'm going to do is reduce this value. I'll go down to 8 inches. Oops. And I'm just going to drop this down until I have an angle impact. So that goes down to 30 degrees. That goes down to 22.5 and 15. Thought we got it more drastic. 11.25. Okay. Thought I would got more drastic of a result there. But let's do this. Let's go back to my config here, and let's look at my options here. So this is saying at 15 degrees, my minimum height is, my minimum angle is 15 degrees. So let me do a 2.25. So currently this is at 11.25 as far as a bend angle goes. So according to the Greenlee chart, if I was making a 2.25 inch offset, I should be able to be at 15 degrees. So currently it's not set, so I'll go ahead and apply this. And now when I bump that, you'll see the angle went to 15 degrees. So this was a very minor change. I would have thought it would have been a little more drastic. I think you see a little more impact on larger diameters, but it's really when you're having small offsets are the issue. So, it's when I'm making in this example, 2-inch offset, sometimes that can be a drastic difference. The use case or that was reported, usually this would be down to like 5 degrees when really you could get this thing at 15. So that was the issue. Okay, so the question here is it okay to enable minimum height by angle on an existing project that has conduit already? Will it change the existing bends? So the answer is um, it doesn't retroactively change bends by enabling this. If you use the refresh button, it will change bends based on the refresh buttons, and anything new or modified will get impacted. Um, so while if I came into this new project and I just hit enable, hit OK, nothing is going to happen in the model at all. But if I, bump this conduit or I bump something that triggers an updater to that bend, um, then that bend will get modified. So hopefully that clarifies the question. No, things just don't change, but eventually they will if they get modified or refreshed or something. So we're right about at time. If there's any last minute questions or comments, please fill them into the chat window, but that was pretty much what I wanted to cover, I think. If there are any specific topics that anybody would like to see in the future, please reach out to us and let us know, and we can try to prepare something for that. All right, well, I think we can call it.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Adam, for walking us through everything today. And thank you to everyone who has joined us. I hope you found the information valuable. Please make sure to keep following us on social media to keep up with all the upcoming webinars. You can also find more demos and past webinars on our YouTube channel. And as a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and we are going to send the recording out in an email to all registrants. If you were not, if we didn't get your question today, don't worry, our team will be following up and be in touch with you. So keep an eye out for an email for those of you who Adam mentioned he'd be following up with. So thank you again, everyone, and have a fantastic day.